Monteith. I'm a retired orthopedic surgeon. I do 4 hours of talk radio every day. Actually, 5 hours of talk radio including the American Freedom Network, the Genesis Network, the Radio Liberty Network. And, of course, we have a Saturday program as well under Radio Liberty. And our job is to try to educate the American people by the miracle of radio, internet, shortwave, and satellite, what's really going on. Now, we have about 60 outlets every week, and we have a recurrent theme, and that is that we are involved in a spiritual battle being fought on the political, ideological, and cultural battlefield. Many people talk about the political battle, Republicans, Democrats. Some people talk about the ideological battle, right, left, conservative, liberal. But these are only artificial designations. The truth of the matter is there's not a dime's worth of difference between the Republican and the Democrat Party. As far as what's going on with the right and the left, both sides are being led by the same people. The people who are working behind the scenes, we refer to them as the establishment, the Brotherhood of Darkness. Some people refer to them as the Order of the Quest. Some people refer to them as the occult hierarchy or the spiritual hierarchy. These people have infiltrated both sides of the political spectrum and are using their wealth and power to bring about a new world order and a new world religion. In fact, indeed, in many instances, they're using the wealth and power of the United States to bring this about because of the spiritual hierarchy, the occult hierarchy, really does control the American government. They work through our great tax-exempt foundations, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation. We have a book here, one of the most important books, and we've kept this in print ourselves for many years. It's called Foundations, Their Power and Influence. Now, this book was written back in 1958, and it was written to actually cover the Reese Committee, a congressional investigation in 1953 and 1954, which was authorized to investigate the great tax-exempt foundations to find out why they were instrumental in bringing communism to China, because they were. And, of course, the Reese Committee report was carefully suppressed by the controlled media. So most people have never heard of the committee report. That's why we've kept the book in print. But what the Reese Committee found was that the Rockefeller Foundation and the Ford Foundation and the Carnegie Foundation have been working for the best part of a century to destroy this country and to bring about a Marxist country, a Marxist nation here, and this new world order. Now, why would they do that? Why would the great tax-exempt foundations be intent upon destroying America? Well, very simply, because they want to, first of all, create an enemy, and because we have an enemy, the American people are willing to accept the rule by the government. After all, if we have an enemy, don't we need somebody to protect us? And who better than our own government? That's why the American people are willing to pay such massive amounts of taxes so we will have the most powerful army in the world. But are we really being protected against the enemy? The United States puts out more money for its defense system than all the rest of the countries in the world put together. Why do we need so much money for our military? Well, we're still occupying Germany 60 years after the Second World War ended, and Japan 60 years after the Second World War ended. We're still occupying South Korea 50 years after the Second World War ended. And this is because we want to dominate the world. The United States today has troops in 130 nations. We have over 700 overseas bases, military bases, where our troops are quartered to dominate the world. The reason that the great tax-exempt foundations are funding this move towards a Marxist society here in the United States is because they want to undermine our constitutional system, which limits the power of the federal government. They want to centralize all power in Washington, D.C. in the name of fighting an imaginary enemy. And when all power is centralized in Washington, D.C., then, of course, they are going to control our government. And we They are going to control our politicians and buy and sell them to get their people put in positions of power. And then, of course, we can have a dictatorship here. And who do you think is going to own and control the dictatorship? Why, the people who control the wealth of our country are the people who control the wealth of the Rockefellers and of the Carnegies and the Fords. And certainly there's a small group of very wealthy people who want to establish an authoritarian society, undermine our Constitution, deprive us of our freedom. The enemy today is not living over in a cave in Pakistan or a cave in the hills of Afghanistan. The enemy is in Washington, D.C., and many times in New York City, and located at 58 East 68th Street in New York, which is the headquarters of the Council on Foreign Relations, and at the headquarters of the Trilateral Commission, and the headquarters of the great tax-exempt foundations. Their goal is to centralize power, to get the American people to be willing to give up their freedom in the name of being protected from communism, socialism, Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda. Doesn't matter who the enemy is. Why, of course, they need an enemy to rally the people behind government, because they are certainly putting into effect today the tenet that Plato wrote about over 2,350 years ago when he wrote the Republic, where he said, when the tyrant has defeated the enemy by conquest or descent, and there's nothing to fear from him, then he's always out rounding up another enemy so he can rally the people behind him. And that is what's really going on today. That is one reason why the people of great wealth have funded international communism and the Communist Party here in America to frighten us into giving up our freedom. And that is, of course, why we are accepting a tyrannical state here to defend us against the communist movement of the United States, which is created by the very, very people who want to take away our freedom. And so I hope that will answer your questions. Probably one of the most efficient means to learn about what's going on today is my book, The Brotherhood of Darkness. It's now in its 11th printing, and it's about 6 to 7 years old. But it basically asks the question, who is behind what's going on today? Everybody knows something seriously is wrong. They just don't understand what it is or who it is who's responsible for what's happening. So in my book, The Brotherhood of Darkness, we simply ask the question, who is behind what's going on? Is it the Council on Foreign Relations? Is it the Trilateral Commission? Is it the Vatican? Is it the Jews? Is it the central bankers? Is it the Masons? Is it the Theosophists? Is it the members of the Rosicrucian order, or the myriad of other organizations out there, the Federal Reserve System, the great tax-exempt foundations? And then pointing out that all of these organizations, and certainly this is not all Catholics or all Jews, but a small component within both groups, along with all the other organizations I mentioned, is intent upon creating a one world government, destroying existing religion, and bringing about a one world leader. Now, this goal has been around for 5,000 years. And if you trace the origin of the idea that is being expressed today by all of these organizations, why, you'll find out that, well, basically, to understand what's going on, you must understand that all of these organizations have the same common denominator. They want to create a one world government, they want to destroy existing religion, and they want a world ruler. All of these organizations have a spiritual side to them, a spiritual foundation. And you can trace that spiritual foundation back 5,000 years. And you can trace it back in part to the Tower of Babel that was built by Nimrod. And here's a picture of the Tower of Babel. It was painted sometime in the 1500s. And of course, this is the incomplete Tower of Babylon. You will notice that the stars there that surround the tower are upside down with the point downward. That is a satanic star. In the lower quadrant here, you'll notice where my little finger is pointing, the caption, "One tongue, many voices," meaning the uniting of the European Union, because this today is the symbol of the European Union, uniting Europe as the first step towards uniting the world. If you were to go to Strasbourg, why you would find today there a building that is actually patterned after the incomplete Tower of Babylon. The building is built incomplete. It gives the impression of being completed, although it is completed. And it is where, of course, the bureaucracy for the European Parliament sits, and that European Parliament then is where the bureaucracy that controls Europe, that rules over Europe today, is situated. This same process is being carried out in the United States. The leaders of both political parties are supporting something called the American or the North American Union. It is being implemented without the knowledge and consent of our elected representatives, and the people who are implementing this idea to unite the Northern Hemisphere are simply lying to the American people, and they have their shills working within the media who will attack and demonize anybody who tries to bring out the truth about this idea to destroy national sovereignty, because this is what it's about. They intend to destroy the sovereignty of all of the nations of the world, to bring them all under complete control. Now, to get this accomplished, I really believe that they're probably going to have the Third World War. We know that the First World War was fought to bring about the League of Nations. The Second World War was fought to bring about the United Nations. But America, the people of America, had not suffered sufficiently. They were not yet ready to give up their freedom and their liberty. That is why a Third World War is going to be needed to bring about this age-old dream of the world government. And remember, this idea has been around going back to the time of Nimrod. It's been tried repeatedly, but never have they been able to centralize as much power as they did today. Certainly during the early part of the 20th century, Great Britain controlled a third of the population of the world. Then, of course, along came the communists, and they controlled a third of the population of the world. But today, the United States dominates probably 4/5 of the population of the world. And the few areas that are not under our control, such as India, and of course, the Arab countries, are being brought under control today. And you say, what about communist China? I would simply point out that the United States government brought the Chinese communists to power back in 1950, and anybody who questions that needs to read my book, The Brotherhood of Darkness, where we simply quote the government reports that came out at that time. And to read the book we mentioned earlier, Foundations, Their Power and Their Influence, which points out how the government, the United States government, intentionally brought communism to China. Who is financing communism in China today? Why, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the East Asian Development Bank, the Export-Import Bank, American corporations, American banks, yes, and even the American government is actually subsidizing loans to the communists, is actually guaranteeing American corporations that invest in China that if their property, their businesses are actually taken over by the Chinese communists, these American corporations will get back not only the money they've invested, but 2 or 3 times the amount of money they've invested. The United States government today is subsidizing communist China. The United States government today, as incredible as it seems, is subsidizing Russia. And if you doubt that, of course, you need to read my newsletters, the March, April, and May newsletters, Radio Liberty. You'll find them at radioliberty.com. Look under March, April, May 2000 newsletters. And of course, what is really going on today is all based on deception. There is a small group of people who are, of course, financing our so-called enemies to rally the people behind government, and that is intent upon plunging the world into World War III. And the whole idea is to get the Muslims and the Jews and the Christians to destroy one another. And of course, that's covered in my February 2007 newsletter, where we simply quote the writings of Alice Bailey, who was a mystic who actually channeled some 25 books from a demonic spirit named Joakul. And in several of her books, she talks about the necessity of precipitating this great final battle of mankind, where the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims destroy one another, and after that will come the New World Order.